So what is it about Auburn that made you put that bet over some of the other favorites that are in maybe those top 2 or even number 3 seeds, a team like Tennessee or Purdue that might have been underseeded?
Well, they were completely mispriced. I mean, Jabari Smith was going to be one of the best players in college basketball. You got to remember what happened to Auburn last year. They had a bunch of injuries, COVID stuff. So I think the COVID year kind of hurt the perception of some of these teams. Bruce Pearl, we all know he recruits, so he's reloaded. The only thing I missed on that cap was Alan Flanagan had an Achilles injury, and we all knew he was going to be back at some point this season. He hasn't been the same player. If he had been the same player, I don't know how many games Auburn would have lost. But that's where they're a little weak, is at the guard position without a healthy Flanagan. So that's how you can beat them. But they're talented, they're deep. They could still make a run for sure.
Tom, what is the deepest part of this bracket? Where do you see the better games early in the first and second rounds?
Yeah, I think it's that South bracket. There's a lot of good games there. I think they got, when I look at mid-majors, I want to see the talent that they have. Chattanooga's got 3 guys that can play pretty much anywhere. So they're a dangerous mid-major team. Listen, I've watched Yale play a ton. They're not dangerous. Yale needs everything to go perfect to beat Purdue, right? Chattanooga's got players. UAB has players. So, and you got Tennessee in that region. You got Illinois. You have Houston. You have Arizona. To me, that's the most interesting region to watch.
Now, a lot of those other mid-rangers that you were mentioning are climbing in terms of the overall rankings where they finished at the end of the season. UAB, for example, Conference USA was really only getting 14 seeds, and that was it. A team like Murray State was only getting double-digit seeds. Now they're finally a 7, and they have a really good team too. And so, do you think as a whole, like, there's a little bit coming together more between the Power Fives and the mid-majors, or those second-tier conferences like the Atlantic 10 and the AAC and stuff like that?
I do, and I also think it depends on the year. This year, the mid-majors, when you're looking at mid-majors, you want to look at experience because a more experienced team like a Loyola, they're going to be tough if they get in the tournament. So I think this year, some of the mid-majors have guys who have been there for a while, have been to the tournament a couple of times, and then you look at the top teams, and they're not quite as dominant. Last year, we all knew, barring a major upset, it was going to be Gonzaga and Baylor. They were going to fight it out in the championship game. This year, I could see 7, 8, 9 different teams winning it. So I think the mid-majors are a lot closer to the bigger schools this year.
As everybody knows, we are talking to NBC Sports edge betting and college basketball analyst Thomas Casale. I'm a big Villanova fan, too. I love Jay Wright. I think he's one of the best coaches right now in all of college basketball. We talk about Duke, and they were trying to put the list of all the top quarterbacks going into this tournament. And obviously, everybody, Coach K is number 1. But Jay Wright, he's won 2 national championships, I think, in 5 years. He's a sensational coach. He really is. And he always gets the most out of his players. In this tournament, I mean, I'm looking at, his way to the Sweet 16. I think he has an easy way to the Sweet 16. And if somehow he gets through maybe Tennessee or, Michigan, I mean, they're going to go into the Elite Eights. I think they have an absolute great chance of winning the whole thing again this year. Where do you see Villanova in this tournament?
Yeah, I actually have them losing to Loyola only because I like Loyola, but that's going to be a good game. Here's the thing about Jay Wright. He's done a fantastic job this year. This isn't his most talented Villanova team. They get it done with defense. The reason why Jay Wright is so good is because he changes to his personnel. So, listen, I agree. I think Villanova could give the team, I think that Arizona doesn't want to play would be Villanova, because Villanova is going to slow that game down to a crawl. They're going to steal possessions. They're going to frustrate Arizona if the shots aren't going in. So if they can get that far, Villanova's got a good chance to upset Arizona, I think. As someone who took Arizona to win it all, I wouldn't want to see that matchup.
I've done it in the past, too, and they've let me down late into the Sweet 16, Elite 8. That seems to be where their path has been. All right. A team that is not a 5 seed, not one of the top 5 seeds, most likely to make a Final Four run, 6 through 16. Who do you think it is and why?
6 through 16, huh? Well, I'm going to go with the team I just mentioned. I'm going to go with Loyola. Okay. I think if they can get by Villanova, I think Loyola over Ohio State's my top bet of the first round. That's why
I love that too. Yes.
Yeah. So the whole world does. So I mean, who knows? But assuming they get by Ohio State, I think that's going to be a rock fight between Loyola and Villanova. Whoever wins that game, I think is going to be very dangerous the rest of the tournament. So if Loyola can get that one out, get that one a tight, close defensive battle, I think they have a shot to get to the Final Four.
Tom, all the number one seeds, obviously Gonzaga, Arizona, Baylor, and Kansas. Who do you think, out of all the number one seeds, could squeak in and get into the Final Four?
Arizona for sure. I just think when they're right, they're so hard to play. The way they move the ball. Kansas has a nice road. I have a Kansas future too from before the season at 18-1, and at the end of the year, I wasn't all that high on them, to be honest. But their draw really works for them. So those would be the two. I mean, listen, everyone's going to pick Gonzaga. I like UConn. I like the way they match up with teams, their physicality, their rebounding, the way they defend. I think if they play Gonzaga, they can give them a run for their money. So I took an upset there.
So as a whole, like the top 4 teams, the powerhouses combined, which do you think has the strongest of those groupings where you could see more of like a chalk type region rather than one with a lot of upsets? You were saying the Arizona region had a lot of upsets. Is there one that you think is the opposite? It'll just be normal.
Yeah, I think it's the Kansas region. Like I said, I think if Miami beats USC, I think you're looking at a Kansas Auburn 1-2 Elite 8 game. That's what it looks like to me.
As everybody knows, we are talking NBC Sports Edge betting and college basketball analyst Thomas Casale. Last question for me. You just mentioned UConn. Obviously, Danny Early is running the show over there, and I want to see one of these closer. New York. Connecticut isn't obviously Connecticut, but I root for them because it's New York to me. Okay, Connecticut is New York. What are your thoughts if Connecticut could somehow get past Gonzaga? Do you think Connecticut can make a run to the Final Four?
Yeah, I do. I have them in the Final Four.
Really?
Only because when I pick the brackets and bet, I try to find matchups and teams in the tournament that are hard to play on short turnarounds. Don't look at what like teams like Connecticut or Villanova did in their conference. Those teams know each other up, down, and sideways. These are teams you have to get prepared for in 24 to 48 hours a lot of times. So Connecticut, for me, is a tough team to prepare for. Now, listen, they have a tough first-round game against New Mexico State. Who knows? Maybe they lose, right? Mm-hmm. I always say a couple of years ago, New Mexico State almost beat Auburn at the buzzer, and Auburn went to the Final Four. A lot of times these first games, you just got to get by them, and then teams start picking up momentum. I think UConn is one of those teams that can do that.
I fell for New Mexico State 3 straight years, and they always look so good on paper. And just they always end up with what seems like a good matchup.
Don't let him pick out your bracket. That's for sure, Tom. Do not.
I'm agreeing with a lot of things he's saying, though. I like the UAB. He mentioned Colgate, which I like, and he mentioned that region being wacky, which I have a lot of.
Well, didn't we interview the Colgate coach?
Yes, we did, and we also interviewed the Yale coach as well.
Yeah.
James Jones and Matt Langle, the Colgate coach, has done a very good job.
Did they invite us to come over there to practices and interview the players, and we never went?
Well, yeah, COVID didn't really help that kind of thing either. All right, so my last question is more about the general landscape of college basketball. We kind of saw it with college football, all these expansions now that are happening with the SEC getting 2 new teams, Oklahoma and Texas, and also the transfer portal making a difference. Can you see that kind of thing happening in college basketball? You saw with UConn now moving back to the Big East really growing to power conference too, but even some of the other ones too. Can you see that kind of thing where these conferences kind of overload and make it the powerhouse?
Maybe. I don't know if it's the same thing as football. College basketball is a weird sport. It's the only sport I know of that goes from 0 to 100. You know what I mean? Like nobody cares about college basketball other than me and 11 other people in November and December, right? Everybody's watching football, betting football. So, college football is your huge, huge moneymaker. They're going to bring in for college basketball. The moneymaker is this. It's the tournament. It's not the teams. It's not the leagues. It's the actual event. I mean, just think about college football. The moneymaker isn't the national championship game. The moneymaker is the teams and the schools. So I think it's a little bit different, and being so many teams in college basketball, I think the powers that be have a system they like right now. So I can't see much changing anytime soon.
Tom, we really appreciate you joining us. Tell the fans how they can find you on social media.
Sure, you can find me at the Tom Casale on Twitter, and you'll see me complaining about Syracuse running the 2-3 zone all the time.
Well, I definitely want to get you on after this tournament and see what you thought about the tournament and see where your bracket fell. I mean, it's so funny because every time I play the bracket every year, it usually what kills me is the second rounds. The first rounds, I'm dead on usually. I lose like 2 games, maybe 3, and then I get into the second round, and then all of a sudden my bracket falls apart. It always does. And then my Final Four, by the time I get to the Final Four, last year I think 2 of my teams made
Well, you
it to
had
the Final
Baylor.
Four.
You were right on Baylor at the start.
But I picked Baylor to win the whole thing
At the
last
start.
year. I picked Baylor to win the whole thing. But everybody else, I think I was completely wrong. Didn't I have?
You had Alabama, which I had too.
Yeah.
I think you had Ohio State and
Iowa. Didn't I have Iowa?
Iowa. Yes, that was your other one.
I had Iowa.
It wasn't Ohio State. It was somebody else. No, it was Iowa, and I think maybe Florida State or something like that.
Iowa got eliminated in the second
round to Oregon, who was in my Final Four, so I was right about that, but we're not right about much else. I had Alabama as well, but I was dead wrong on Baylor because they always choked, and they won it all last year. So.
That's what's great about the brackets. You know, it's someone like me. I lost to my 6-year-old son last year, so I mean, that's why March Madness is so popular. It doesn't mean a guy like me who studies college basketball every night is going to, you need some luck in the brackets. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah, well, I try to listen to some of these bracketologists, and I bracket myself down the toilet, okay? So there you go. But thank you so much, Tom. We'll get you on again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good night.